Welcome to Nailing the Apex, everyone. I'm Tim Hauraney, joined today by Adam Wylde from the Steve Dangle podcast and SDPN. Adam, what's going on, man? Thanks for taking the time to do this.
Tim, it's a pleasure. It's nice to be back. I'm very excited. Listen, I'm a little sad because after 2 straight weeks, I felt a little bit spoiled, and they rarely ever do 3 weeks in a row. So here we are, and a non-race weekend. Sad. It makes me sad.
That's okay. I mean, we got racing next weekend, but wanted to get you on today to discuss the findings from an interesting article from a company called Buzz Radar. And so what they did is it's a part one of a 3-part report that they have conducted on F1 Formula One. So part one was titled, "Have We Reached Peak F1?" It's a research study that was completed by a social media intelligence group. They did a study on F1's social media using AI and humans as well. So, Adam, if we go all the way back to 2022, F1 had a boom in popularity. They were coming off the back of an extremely successful 2021 title battle between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, and then into 2022, where we saw new cars, new regulations, etc. So the report pulled data from about 70 million fan posts, and the data showed that there was a decline of interest in Formula One due to the dominance of Red Bull and Max Verstappen. So social mentions of F1 were down 70.2% from January to May compared to that of 2022. So new followers also down 46%, and the social reach all down 64%. So data showing that 2022 compared to 2023, there are drops in mentions of F1, numbers in growth of new followers was not good also. So they also looked at social conversations about Formula One and the use of negative adjectives that were associated with the sport. Words like boring are, quote, high-frequency descriptors replacing erstwhile positive words like interesting and exciting. So Buzz Radar feels that the big cause of the drop-off is single-team domination. So first off, with that information, just want to get your thoughts on all of that before we dig into their findings a little bit more.
Well, I'm not totally surprised. I think you had a couple things going, okay? You had the title bout of all bouts between Max and Lewis. And you had it end not in who won the race. You had it end in who decided the race with Michael Massey. And I don't doubt that Michael Massey's a good person, but Formula One, having him be the guy in control of that race was a disaster. And then you follow that up with a really weak season of Drive to Survive. That is of all the, if you're watching that, and that is the gateway drug, right? That Netflix show is the thing that really drove a lot of the surge in popularity in Formula One. To me, in that is, if you ask anybody that's watched the show, that's the weakest season. And it's because you could tell Formula One gets in there and goes, we don't want to make this a thing. But it's a thing. And drivers are still being asked about it. I think if you had Max or Lewis be the outright winner, it should have been Lewis, if you ask me, then you have a definitive story. You have a definitive story, and going into that next year, Max would have inevitably won the first year, I think, of the new regulations. And then you have a great story that stretches over 2 years. Instead, you have a disaster. You have a really weak lead into the next season, which is Drive to Survive is the lead into the Formula One season. And then you have a little bit of Ferrari racing, but mostly Red Bull dominating the second half. And this year has been all Red Bull. I'm not surprised. If you love motorsport, then it's beyond the whoever places first. But if you love, if you only love finding out who comes first, or you're sort of new to the sport, you might not understand that yet. Right?
So it's interesting, when you talk about Drive to Survive, it wasn't really heavily mentioned within the document and their findings. What they found was there was mainly a direct comparison between title fights between teams and drivers. So they did further comparisons. They went back to 2016. So the Rosberg versus Hamilton, where Rosberg won the title by just 5 points. And there was a massive uptick in conversation because of that title battle. While in 2018 to 2020, that's the Hamilton, the Mercedes sort of dominance era. The conversation around F1 stagnated.
Yeah.
Then it grew significantly again during the 2021 season, which was the closest championship battle since 2016.
Yeah.
They said, quote, 2023 is on course to continue losing conversation, and this pattern will continue until the racing becomes closer again. It's important to note, however, that Buzz Radar did stress that F1's rise in online conversation and popularity is massively impressive, considering it still holds a very strong position. Where do you think, in terms of the most discussed from all the sporting leagues in the world, where do you think F1 ranks in that discussion? So we're talking like, you're talking Champions League, Premier League, you're talking cricket, hockey, baseball, NFL,
rugby,
tennis, boom, boom.
It's got to be top 10, but if it's in the top 5, I'd be surprised.
Okay. Their data suggests that it is in the top 5. It's number 5.
Number 5. That's really impressive. I mean, it is a global sport, right? It is, but I the reason I said I'd be surprised is because I think, Premier League is, or just soccer in general, is going to be crazy. NFL is going to be crazy, and then it sort of gets a little bit murkier because you basically have, you've got the West's version of their big sport. The NFL is an enormous, just a monster in terms of social media interaction. But I guess it's only on for 4 or 5 months of the year.
That's right.
Formula One's on for 10 months of the year, so I can see how they can. I don't think they're beating the NFL, but I can see how they could come close. And that clearly they're going to hang on to some of those gains. And every sport's popularity comes in waves, right? You have certain seasons in any sport that's like what you consider a classic season, right? Mm-hmm. I just feel like the reason I brought up Drive to Survive specifically is because it is the entertainment lead-in that spices you up and gets you ready. They release it in February for a reason. It's because the racing starts in March, April. And that's when the testing is. And that gets you excited. And so I know they didn't mention it in the survey, but I do think that it's such a key part of Liberty Media, owner of F1's plan to continue to grow this sport. And you know what, Tim, based on what you're telling me anyway, if Nico Rosberg versus Lewis Hamilton is the most talked about after 2021, so the 2016 race versus the 2021 race, then I think the person that we all should blame and point the finger at is Sergio Perez. Because listen, if it's car to car, Red Bull is going to beat everybody on the track. But if it's driver to driver, Sergio hasn't come anywhere close to matching Max outside of the first 7 races.
Well, he was close. Like he was close off the top, right?
Yeah.
Like leading into Miami, things
close,
were
is this a different conversation?
I think so. I think if the championship was a lot closer, we may be talking a little bit differently. And it gets a little spicy, right? Because you remember that Hamilton Rosberg, 2016 battle, like those guys were not friends at that point. That was like that was.
I think they're still not
enemies.
Friends.
Yeah, they're not. I doubt it. I mean, they were enemies going at it in that season, right? And maybe even the season before.
Tim, when you were racing,
it's interesting to note. Yeah.
When you were racing, did you ever have a rivalry? Listen, I know that there wasn't the stakes involved like Formula One Championship, but did you ever have like rivalries with your co-drivers, like same team? Guys that you were like, okay, like I know we have to be friendly, but on the track, all bets are off.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, you're not friends on the track, man. That's where it's kind of like you draw the line at things. Like you can be cordial when you're off the track. You do have to help the team. You have to make sure you're helping with a positive environment, because obviously the crew works really hard, really long days, the engineers and mechanics, everyone behind the scenes. So I think as the driver dynamic, you have to keep things pretty cordial and positive. But when you're on the racetrack, man, gloves are off. There are no friends, and you have at it. You'll discuss things afterwards when the sessions are completed or the race is over, hash it out, and that's the end of it, and you move on. Yeah, usually that's the way certain things work. But with Formula One, such a big stage, such a big platform, and sometimes, back in the day, these drivers only had so many chances to actually win a title.
Mm-hmm.
And, at that moment, it's like mind games start to come in, because it's like they got to do whatever they got to do to try and get a title, because next year is promised to nobody, right? It just, you don't know what you're going to get. Circling back to this this document thing, the top 5 discussed sporting leagues in the world, their data suggests that it's NFL is number 1, Champions League is number 2, Premier League, the MLB slid in there.
Wow. Well, they have a lot of games.
Yeah, that was the other part of it that they had mentioned, is that, even though like F1 grew its conversation by 80% between 2016 and 2022, and the only other sport in the world that bettered them was the Indian Premier League and UEFA Champions League. And it carries on to say that remarkably, F1 did this while also hosting fewer events than any other sporting league.
Wow. Listen, it's an impressive rise.
Smaller pie, right?
Yeah. And listen, as long as we have Helmut Marko around to say crazy stuff, we're going to have lots to chat about during the week, right? It's impressive. And listen, the decline is something that I think next year changes, right? Like in whatever declines they've seen, I think next year this is a different kettle of worms, man, or kettle of fish, not kettle of worms. No one puts worms in a kettle.
I think like as a whole, like you're right. I mean, as the sport itself is still in way better shape than it's ever been. The teams are actually worth a lot of money now, and they weren't in the past. The teams are actually, making money back, which is important. And for the first time in my lifetime, there actually is a legit conversation being had about growing the grid and the values of these teams rising, which in your point leads us to 2024, right? You've got McLaren, who at the moment is just on a trajectory that's something that, again, I've never seen anything like a turnaround like this in an F1 season happen before. And I think that's a prime jumping spot for conversation with what Lando Norris has said at the end of the Japanese Grand Prix. You and I touched on it a bit in our last podcast, but I think one of the most important things from all of that is basically him saying, we're coming for you, Red Bull.
Yeah. Yeah. And him believing that, which is cool.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Realistic.
For sure. I mean, I think yeah. So I think, obviously coming off of Japan, scoring double podiums at him. I mean, Red Bull Racing, obviously not catchable this season at all. Andrea Stella believes the same. Like he doesn't feel that the team can take a big enough step to actually claw them back this season, but they've made huge gains this season with a big upgrade that was brought to Austria, then scoring points and more developments. And then they've jumped from the back of the grid to one of the fastest teams on the grid in Monson over the last several races as well. They're one of the highest point scorers on the grid over those last several races, and they are now the second fastest car on the entire grid,
which is amazing. So
you have to wonder if they're going to be able to make this jump to catch Red Bull next season.
Well, I think the chance of catching them this year is all you need, and this is a tough task given the thing. You need driver error, right? For them to catch them this year, you're going to need a driver error. You're going to need Max to screw up. Doesn't happen very often, right? But in the sense, the whatever they figured it out really well, and they figured it out quickly and in season. You never saw like Minardi come from the back and start to beat Michael Schumacher. It never happened, right? So never, or like Marussia or any of the other teams that have cycled through.
None of them.
Bar Honda, which had good seasons, but never like this. I wonder about. I wonder about the. I wonder about this McLaren tear, and when we looked at how well Aston Martin did at the beginning of the year and their inability to double down on that strength, whatever it was that pushed them ahead, people caught up. They found them out, and obviously Lance has had a bit of a rough year, and Alonso's been good, but he can't outdrive his car at the moment. I am curious about how much Mercedes has taken from what McLaren has done. Because the one thing I'll give Mercedes credit for is they were a non-factor to start 2022. And by the end of the year, they were second place. Start this year, both Lewis and George said, we're not going to be winning any races. And not that they've been close. They had a couple sniffs, but they are in there to be second place again. And, everybody's looking at McLaren. I'm looking at Mercedes, who's got the history, who's got the pressure. And frankly, they're mad. They're upset that they're second. Like, McLaren's happy to be there. Mercedes is like, we expect to be better than this,
Yeah, it's a great point, too, because if you look at, like you had said, where they were to start the season, like, it wasn't good at all. Like, the car was crap. They decided to stick with this same philosophy that they were running in 2022, which clearly they had outdeveloped. They just couldn't push it any further than what they had already done. And then quickly reverting to something totally different in aero philosophy once the Monaco Grand Prix rolled around. And that's kind of like, Adam, when I look at it, it's like a cut and paste job, really, because that car still has the bones of last year's car. Like, we're still talking about a team that is second in the constructor standings with technically a chassis that's almost 12 months old. They're still using the side impact structures that they've built outwardly from this car. And that right there shows you they've had to build everything around that for this season, which is pretty ridiculous when you think about it, because there's a ton of performance there just for them to be gained. And right now, currently, I mean, they're sometimes third fastest, second fastest teams in races. And so it's impressive, I think, from the standpoint of what Mercedes has done this season. But yeah, like, if you look at next season, I mean, let's see how much wind tunnel time they're going to get, right? Like, they're going to get, swear. Okay. So if you go back to June 30th, okay. So at June 30th, that's the time where all the teams, wherever they were in the standings at that moment, that'll lock them in for their restricted testing time for wind tunnel and CFD. And for those who don't know, that's basically where you make your car faster. And those times get reduced for championship winners and downwards. So for Red Bull, for instance, they get 60%. Now, they were supposed to get 70%, but because they had that cost cap breach penalty from 2021, exactly. So they get knocked 10% down, which brings them to 60%. And they have to stay at 60% of this wind tunnel testing time until October. And so right now, everyone's developing their 2024 cars. It's just the way it is. But for Red Bull, this is the allotted time that they get. For Mercedes, they get 75%. They're already getting 15% more than Red Bull Racing is. And then you've got Aston Martin in third at 80%, Ferraris in fourth, 85%, Alpines in fifth with 90%, and in sixth, it's McLaren with 95% wind tunnel CFD design time.
That's pretty good. I like that from McLaren. And listen, I don't want to. I wasn't trying to denigrate the team. I'm a dyed-in-the-wool McLaren fan. I love what they're doing. I don't care how many sponsorships they sell in the car. If there's any orange left by next year, Zach Brown will have sold it. I don't care. But I think the thing is, and this is going to be really important for next year. The first 5 races. Can we get a 2 or a 3-way battle the first 5 races? If we get that, then very likely we're going to have a 2-way race the rest of the way between whatever 2 teams emerge from the 3-way, right? And I got to watch my phrasing here. But the point is that if you get a good little Netflix bump at the beginning, you get excitement, and then you get a team that legitimately challenges Red Bull, or maybe 2 that legitimately challenges Red Bull in the first 5 races, I think we're back to having conversations about, holy smokes, look at the year-over-year growth for Formula One, right? And as we said kind of last episode, like, greatness is boring. Tom Brady winning all those Super Bowls is boring. Or at least to some people it's boring. To people in Boston, it was awesome. If you're a Red Bull fan, I would love to know, Tim, if they could have that same company do a survey, but it's just for Red Bull Racing. Because I can guarantee you this. There are people who didn't know who Red Bull Racing was 5 years ago. Even though Red Bull won 4 championships in a row, there's plenty of people who had never heard of them who are wearing Red Bull every day. I see it in my neighborhood. People walking around with Red Bull jackets. Yeah. Because they're huge winners. So maybe you lose a little bit on the interest side from casual audiences. It's going to happen. But I do think you double down on your hardcore fans when you've got a team winning. Like, look at all the Mercedes fans. Do you think that they're there because they hated watching Lewis Hamilton win all those championships? I think they created a hardcore fan base. Ferrari fans. Why is Ferrari when you go to Monza? Like, forget Max Verstappen's traveling fans. They wouldn't even find a seat at Monza. There's no room for them. Ferrari is everywhere all the time. Why is that? Because they won championship after championship after championship after championship, and people at the time said it was boring. I think maybe it's not great for Formula One on the whole, but I think that this is good for Red Bull, and I think when Mercedes and McLaren, and I think this is going to sound crazy, but I think Ferrari's going to have a good year next year. I think their car's better than they're leading on. That is going to be good for those brands and those hardcore fans, and it's going to be better for the sport. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think I think a big part of it is, Adam, is that when you get, and we've seen it before in Formula One, obviously, when you get a team or a driver who is dominating, the conversation that focuses around first place changes. And you have to focus a little bit further on down the grid because there are a ton of great storylines that are happening there as well. And I think for maybe some of the fans who were newer coming into Formula One, maybe they kind of lost that appetite because there wasn't that battle that was happening at the front. But you're still, in this report, looking at it a little closer, you're still getting Formula One is still on a rise, and it is still extremely popular. It's not like we're talking that this thing is totally died off, like
bottoming out. Yeah, no,
it's still on a massive trajectory, dude. It's just whether or not, compared to seasons on past, how fast it's actually growing, where there has been decline because of the stuff that's happening at the front. But I think that's important for Formula One, right? You need
absolutely
competition at the front, and so I just think if we take a look at some of the teams, and like you had mentioned, Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, I mean, if you get these teams, battling again up at the front, I mean, the storylines, the sport will take off again. It'll be a rocket ship and all this other great stuff. And I do feel that it is possible for that to happen, even though some experts say that it probably won't. But Adam, I mean, we've seen, the proof's in the pudding, right? You take a look at McLaren, right, Adam, where they were, like we had mentioned at the beginning of the season, to where they are now. Yeah. So that's thanks to these new regulations.
Yes, 100%. And I don't think, Tim, I'll go to what I know best, which is the NHL. Okay, I know the NHL best.
100%.
When they instituted a salary cap, what it meant was big clubs like Toronto and Detroit and New York and Boston and some of these Eastern big spenders, and there were some big spenders out west, meant that they had to cut their payrolls in half. I think Toronto in 2004 spent $80 million on their players. The salary cap right now is at $80 million in the NHL. So they spent $80 million in 2004. By 2006, when they came back and played again, the salary cap was $42.5 million. So I say that to say this. That same thing has happened to McLaren, Mercedes, Ferrari. I think Renault, Alpine were pretty big spenders as well before the cost cap era. And what it created was chaos for 10 years. You had teams that had never won before, never got a sniff. The Anaheim Ducks never got a sniff. Ottawa Senators never got a sniff, but they both got into the finals. They didn't win. You had teams in smaller markets like New Jersey. Oh, sorry, Anaheim did win in 2008. You had teams like New Jersey winning. You had Detroit did win, but they had a lot of carryover from the previous era. You had a team come out of nowhere, irrelevant for years and years and years. The Chicago Blackhawks had been irrelevant since the 80s or the early 90s and came out and won 3 cups. I think what's going to happen is we're just seeing the effects of the cost cap era. We really are.
Yeah.
And as Tim, as you always say, when you're developing a car, it takes 3 to 4 years to be on a development plan anyway. But I think the cost cap ramifications are just beginning to be felt. And I think stories like McLaren are going to be part of what carries this sport. You may have a dual race for the top tier in Formula One, but if you have a come from behind story like a McLaren actually go in and maybe even challenge for a top 2 or a top 3 spot, That is going to be stuff that really grows the game and keeps it interesting and keeps people on their toes. And I'm excited for that. We're going to see a lot of that. And I think in the next few years, I know Red Bull is, by all accounts, they're kind of one of the smaller teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they're not backed by a huge company, or at least not until Ford takes over. It feels like we're going to see somebody weird win sometime soon. Like, imagine a world where Williams is winning a title again. Imagine a world and Williams, who's won a ton of titles, but in it's been a long time. Imagine a world where Gene Haas has a team in the top 3, right? That or the new Andretti Cadillac whenever that comes out. That's going to be so exciting, and I think everybody wants the hot take. Everybody wants to jump and be like, well, this is what the results are this year, so this is what it is. I think you have to take it on aggregate over 5 to 10 years. Right?
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know. I'm ranting, but I just feel like it's like everybody feels like they have the answer right now. There's no way you could possibly have the answer right now. We're not even through 3 years of this.
And that's the thing, right? Nobody does have that answer, even though there are some people who, like you said, throwing out hot takes saying like, whatever
Formula One has
now.
A problem. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like they have a problem. There are issues, but it's kind of like, I mean, for sure, Red Bull will have an early lead for next season, 100%. It's guaranteed because they've been able to develop the better product faster. And so for all these other teams, and McLaren, I just keep coming back to because they've made the biggest gains. They've made the biggest turnaround.
Sure.
And they are closer now to Red Bull than anybody has been. And I think at the end of the day, it comes down to them being on that right path. Mm-hmm. And there's a ton, Adam, there is a ton of development that can be done with McLaren and Mercedes in the offseason.
Yep.
Like, look at Aston Martin's turnaround from where they were at the end of 2022 to where they were at the beginning of 2023. There's a massive shift in development. And then if you take into consideration that McLaren's car, for the most part, was being developed in Cologne.
Yeah.
It wasn't even being developed on site, dude. Like, yeah. And so you look at how long does that take them to do that, right? You've got to pack all the stuff up. You got to ship it out there. You got to make sure all the data is correlating. You got to make sure all the stuff that you've gotten is working properly, bring it all the way back and then redevelop it. So that's a ton of time that they're losing. But now, since they've got this brand new shiny wind tunnel online, and they actually have the 2024 car in there right now developing for next year.
Yeah.
And so I think for a team like McLaren, Adam, can actually make that jump. And I think in particular, and you said it best, for Mercedes, I think they're hungry, they're pissed off, and they want to make sure that they're beating Red Bull next season. Because if you look at Mercedes, perfect team, right? I mean, at the end of the day, they've got some of the best that money can buy. They have the best infrastructure. They have the best technology. Well, I guess one of the things that stood out to me the most was what Hamilton had said at the end of the Japanese Grand Prix, where he said, like, we've got to hope that, like, for the next 6 months of development that it has to be the best we've ever had to close the gap.
And I think a lot of people made a lot of that quote and they go, wow, that's a lot of pressure to put on your garage to do that, or your factory back home.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You have the privilege of working for Mercedes F1. You work in the candy store. You work in the toy store. Of course. And of course, these people, they're not just people with, degrees in engineering or mechanical engineering or whatever, aerospace, some of them. Like, it's crazy how educated all these everybody in the garage. It's crazy, crazy, crazy. They're so smart, but they're also driven beyond driven. Of course, they're going to respond positively to something like that. If you don't respond positively to a challenge like that from a guy like Lewis Hamilton, you probably shouldn't be working there. I think that him declaring that would fire me up if I was in that garage. I wish I was smart enough to work at a team like that. You know what I mean? Like, it's just there. It's a challenge, and that quote will look awful good if Mercedes wins 1 or 2 of the first 5 races next year. Like, real good. Like, what a PR piece that would be for them.
And even if Red Bull does get off to a strong start for next season, I still see Mercedes, McLaren, Aston Martin, Ferrari. I still see these teams making inroads towards Red Bull. So by the time you get to race 5 or 6, they're starting to claw them back a bit more, because I think at the end of the day, everybody knows the direction they got to go in.
I got a question for you. We've seen Williams really take a step forward this year, and obviously Logan Sargeant's names.
Big time.
We're not sure about if Logan Sargeant's going to be back. It looks like he will. And James Vowels actually put out. To be honest, I was surprised at how honest he's been. He actually answers questions from Williams fans on Instagram. Did you see that video?
The video he put out today?
Yeah.
On Thursday. When did we record? Thursday. Yeah. Did you see?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And he's like, Logan Sargeant has definitive goals that he needs to hit, and we're very clear with him about that. I was like, wow. Like that. Talk about opening up the Cape.
Big time. But he also said, like, they want Logan to succeed and they want him back at the team,
which is really nice. I wish Helmut Marko was that supportive of his drivers. But I think Williams, for me, and this is what I wanted to ask you, they're the next team that could go on a run. Like McLaren's gone on a run, and they deserve it. The technology's fallen into place. They have a fantastic driver lineup, a 1A and a 1B. Those guys they've been racing great. They've been getting along great. That's all good. Clearly, there's a talent gap and a development gap between Alex Albon and Logan Sargeant. It can't be helped. It is what it is. Can you see a world where Williams is challenging for the top of the midfield next year because of these regulations?
Yeah, 100%. I think because of the way we are at with the regulation, I think anybody who is on, I mean, look at AlphaTauri. They sucked to start the season.
Terrible.
That car was horrible, dude. Terrible. They've made massive upgrades to this thing. They've totally turned this car around, and now they are just on the fringes of getting into Q3s, battling for P9, P10. They're right there now. Like, they're starting to push in, and that's doing it within the season, which is remarkable. So, yeah, I could see Williams for sure.
Like challenging an Alpine.
Being one of those teams. Yeah, I think so, 100%. I think one of the biggest things like Williams' problems is infrastructure. It's just how old everything is. They don't have enough equipment. They don't have enough good equipment. Like, I've been to the factory. It is a little dated compared to, like, you go to Aston Martin's factory.
Brand new.
Dude, that thing is state-of-the-art. It's incredible. It's beautiful. And then, like, Williams, as you can tell, it's like it's been run down a little bit. They need to put a little TLC into that, but that's a totally different story. Well, I think, I think like one of the things like for Williams is the fact that during this season, and James Vowles said was publicly open about it on Thursday, basically just saying we're giving all the new parts to Alex, right? And that's because they don't have enough infrastructure to make enough parts for Logan.
And really, even if they did, Tim, would Logan be the best guy to test them on? Is he going to show you what the car can do with it? Probably not. He doesn't have the confidence yet. No. And I wish that were a different answer, but it's like you're not going to get the best data from Logan Sargeant. You're going to get it from Alex. And I wondered too. I saw the Christian Horner quote about Liam Lawson potentially going to Williams. And what I found interesting about it is it affects both Williams and Red Bull, because he said, I don't think that they would want a driver for just 1 year. No. And my question is, why not? Like, I understand wanting to have drivers for more than a year and build them into the team. But if Liam Lawson comes in and is legitimately better than Logan Sargeant, and it helps you climb and it helps you get better data and it helps you get you more prize money, and then you look to the future. I know Williams has its own driver pipeline. I don't think any of those guys are really ready yet. Why not? What if an Esteban Ocon becomes available in 2024? His contract to be up. Maybe he'll want to be out of Alpine. What if one of the better drivers comes up? You know you're going to lose Liam Lawson, and you've shown, hey, we've made a huge jump. We were 10th place, and we're now in 7th place, and now we're in 5th place. Don't you want to be with us? I don't know. That seems like a pretty attractive thing. To me, I think you want to dress the best driver lineup. But I don't know, Tim. Do they believe that Logan Sargeant has that high-end capability?
They do. Yeah, for now. I mean, Vowles has made it known that they still feel that Logan's got a ton of potential left in him. I think like one of the things that he's stressed is the driver development program that Williams has built up. I mean, Logan being the first driver from that program is really important. I think they want him to succeed, because if it doesn't, it puts at risk that driver development program, and Doralton would just possibly shut it down if it's not working at him. I mean, that's
right.
That's a huge thing that could possibly happen because Doralton owns the team. So they need it to work. It has to work, man. Like their driver development program has got to work, because I don't think at the end of the day you can just take a Liam Lawson who's a rookie, throw him in your car for next year and hope that he's going to be fast. And what happens if he doesn't work out? He doesn't have that experience like Esteban Ocon does.
Yep.
So that's a huge deal, man.
Just a thought. I'm very
no.
I got a warm spot for Williams. I think what a great story they are, right?
They are. I agree. I think like seeing where they were at the beginning of the season to where they are now is impressive. But I mean, like the team giving Alex all the new equipment, and like there's things happening behind the scenes we don't know about. I mean, it's fine if Alex is getting an upgrade for one race and then the next race Logan should be getting it, but that's not really what's happening, right? Like Alex is just, the car keeps getting faster and faster for him, where Logan doesn't get all of the upgrades, which means that performance-wise, we really don't know how close they actually are. According to Vowels at the Japanese Grand Prix, during qualifying before he had crashed, they were right on pace to Logan was right on pace to match Alex in terms of lap time on that run that he crashed on. But this isn't the first time that Williams has done something like this, Adam. I mean, they did it to Nicholas Latifi in the past. Like, remember, he didn't get an upgrade until races later, and it was a big upgrade that he was missing out on. So there are, like, I think internally the infrastructure with the team, I think the more that they can build that out, then the better off that they are going to be. And Vowels has actually said that publicly. So interesting team, I think.
Well, interesting.
Like, I got a soft spot for Williams too, man.
But if you were an automaker and you saw, like, cause the automakers that want in are like legitimate high end sellers, right? You've got McLaren, which sells a high end car. Ferrari sells a high end car. Mercedes sells a high end car. Red Bull's going to partner with Ford, which does sell some high end cars. I'm sure there'll be some Mustang, commercials with Max Verstappen and maybe Daniel Ricciardo whenever that happens. But I wonder about a team like Williams. Like Doralton is they are the whole point, that the whole reason they exist is to make money on money, right? They're a capital company. So I wonder if they wouldn't go to, one of these key automakers and make Williams, not change the name Williams, but like, what about this is a terrible example, but like a Williams Volvo or a Williams BMW. Or, you know what I mean? I know BMW left the sport. They could always come back in, where you go and you find that sort of thing and make it into a brand. Because frankly, I think what they're going to need is an injection of capital, if Doralton's not willing to do it, to bring that factory up to specifications. Otherwise, like, what are they doing? Like, if the factory is looking like that, you got to put plans in place to you've already capitalized on a ton of value. Williams is now they bought it for $150 million. It's now worth $700 million. You need to invest some of that, because you should be in the billions very soon.
Yeah. So one of the big things you're talking about is called capital expenditure, which the teams have available to them, but it's only available to them up to a certain amount. And this came in before, I want to say 2021, which was obviously Vowels wasn't at Williams at the time.
Right.
And so he couldn't make the adjustments that he wanted to make. So now that you've got this new team principal, he's now pushing behind closed doors to get that CapEx expanded more so he can spend more. He feels that they have the money to spend on the infrastructure. It's that the rules won't allow them to spend more than what the CapEx is, and it's not much. Mm-hmm. I think like you also made a good point with like an auto manufacturer coming on board. It's kind of like the Andretti thing, right? Like with Andretti wanting to come onto the grid, it's like, okay, well, we're going to bring Cadillac with us, which is a GM product,
luxury brand. traditionally.
Exactly. But that's more of like a marketing exercise, because it's not like Cadillac at this moment, from what we've learned, they're not going to be building the engines.
No. That'll be,
Where
we don't
you
even
look
know
at,
who, I don't know where they'll get their power units. Maybe Ford?
exactly. Who knows, right? They could get it from Alpine.
Yeah.
We have no idea at this moment. But what we do know is the Ford project with Red Bull. And so that's where Red Bull has done a really smart thing, and they've created their own powertrains division where they can build their own engines. And what Ford is really going to be doing is contributing to the, from my understanding, contributing to the battery technology.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
that's going to be a big thing for them.
Oh, yeah. Well, and you said that a lot of the developments that come through Formula One cars actually make it under the auto market, like the general auto
100%.
market, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that's where they test a lot of it out. I don't think people know that.
Yeah, usually. Really?
No, I don't think. I think that that's normal to you, but to the average person like myself, I don't think people know that a lot of the innovations you see in your car, like hybrid engines, a lot of that
racing,
comes from racing.
Yep.
That's cool, Tim. Sorry, I'm taking us all over the place here. I'm fascinated by that.
No, it's all good, man. Yeah, so at the end of all of this, for Williams to succeed, it's got to be something that's going to be built from their infrastructure. And I think they have the money to do this. I think Doralton has the money to do this. Mm-hmm. I think they do need to believe in that driver development program that they do have. James Vowles is sticking behind it. They seem to believe that Logan does have the potential, and they're going to run with him until they feel that he doesn't. And, I've seen what Logan can do on the track. He is a very good driver, and I think that he has that ability. And I think at the end of the day, we talked about this ad nauseum on our last podcast about what Logan needs to do to get back up onto pace with Alex for sure. Adam, this has been fun like always, dude. Thanks for taking the time to do this. You've done like 6 podcasts today, so how you feeling, buddy?
Well, it's one of those days sometimes where you just have a bazillion of them. But I love doing this show with you. I love talking Formula One, and mostly because I get to ask you a bunch of questions that I'd be asking you over text anyway. So it kind of works out.
So what's your thoughts on this Travis Kelce Taylor Swift stuff? You think they're actually dating?
I think they're dating. Jesse Blake thinks they're she's got a movie coming out in a couple of weeks. She is going to be at the game this weekend. It's been reported. But I think that I do think they're legitimately hanging out. How much they really like each other, I don't think it matters. Maybe, I think all of us have had a relationship where it's like, you're hot, I'm hot, let's have some fun. And I feel like that's what this is. But both of them like attention, let's be honest. And they're enjoying the attention too. So why not? What do you think? Do you believe it? No, you don't believe it. Huh?
I don't. No, I don't. I don't believe that. Like, I think at this moment, it's like, let's like go out on a couple dates. Let's get to know each other. Let's see if we have some chemistry, and we'll sort of see what happens. I saw what you guys did on the SDP. I think it was yesterday, dude, where the astrological.
Oh yeah, people want to know if they're going to work together because of their astrological sign. By the way, have you ever seen one of those circular astrological charts?
No, I don't.
Well,
no,
I don't either. But I've seen them, and I got to tell you, Tim, it looks more complicated than the data that you see in Formula One. Crazy stuff. Crazy. I don't know how. If for something that to me is basically made up, it's shocking how complicated people can make it. Amazing.
I was looking at the thing you guys posted, and I was looking. I'm like, I don't even know what this is. Like, I don't even. If you're going based on your love life with this thing, then I think you may be in trouble.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Because, like, holy boy,
you wouldn't believe how many people do. My one of my best friends and ex co-host Jax Irwin from when I was working in radio. She was like, she would actually put stock into that. She'd be like, well, I'm a Leo and this person's a Gemini or whatever, and I know that this isn't going to last. Like, oh, do you? Okay, cool. Like, it didn't mean that she would write them off, but she wouldn't take it as seriously. And people are like that. And okay, all right.
Where's the statistical proof?
Well, and I think the great thing about horoscopes is they're malleable enough that you can make them fit anything that you need them to fit. And that's why people find so much value in them, right? They can just
interesting.
Yeah, that's easy.
And Also, you guys have your live event coming up in St. Catharines on Friday.
Friday, St. Catharines, Welland Avenue, the course and clubhouse. It is sold out. 180 people are going to be there. We're really excited. And what's great about this, Tim, is it gives us the chance to try out this video game. One of our listeners, his name's Chris Atala. He started his own video game studio during the pandemic. He got kind of tired of working for the major operators and wanted to create a game that they all think can't work. So this is going to be like an arcade style hockey game in the same vein as like NHL 94 or Wayne Gretzky's 3D hockey. But it also has like a first person story element where you have to take on the hockey gods and bring the cup back. And it's very, very cool. And we're all for, listen, we're an independent media company, so we're all for supporting other independent artists and creators. And I think Chris is one of those ones where he's a gem, and this game's a lot of fun. So the Kickstarter's open. Check it out on you can see it on the STP episode. It's in the description. But we're going to be able to play it at this course and clubhouse bar because it's a golf simulator, and he's going to bring it, and actually you're going to get to play it on the golf simulator, which is neat.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
I
cool.
saw, like, I was watching, I was showing my girlfriend it because it was like they had something online. It was a YouTube video where kind of like described what it was, and then they showed you the game, and it looks awesome, man. It reminds me of like, like Wayne Gretzky, whatever, and like Madden NFL. Like,
yes, NHL
looks
hits.
Awesome, dude.
Yeah, really fun.
Yes.
Really fun. And for guys like us, like Tim, I don't know if you're a big video game player. I certainly love video games, and there was a social element to it too. Yeah, like it's like some of my best friends were guys that I met playing Star Wars Battlefront. Like and these are guys that are all different ages or whatever. I think the thing is that when you get a little bit older, in my case, you have a kid, it's so hard to devote the same time to it. So
yes.
So being able to jump into a game and immerse yourself and being able to leave, like if you go play Call of Duty online, good luck, you're going to get smoked. There are kids who are 12 who've been playing since they are 2, and they can play 8 hours a day and it doesn't cost them anything. I can't do that. So I'm going to get crushed. But this is one of those games that you can jump in, jump out of, and it's going to be a blast every time you pick it up.
Adam, do you play Call of Duty?
I used to. You
don't anymore?
No, I stopped after I had the most recent Black Ops, which I got with my PS5, and it was really good. Really, really well done. I like the story modes in them. Playing online drives me crazy because after about the first week, people have already hacked the game and they know how to cheat, and it's like that kind of sucks. So when I play online battle or whatever, it's Star Wars Battlefront 2, or I don't know if you ever played Battlefield 1, which is the World War II. World War 1 Battlefield.
1,
outstanding game, still good.
Still
and
good.
people are still playing it. So I play that. I played a lot of Formula 1 a couple years ago, but I fell off with Formula 1 22 because it wasn't much of an improvement. I've heard 23 is really good, but I'm going to wait till 2024 to get the next one next July, and hook up the steering wheel and actually get into it because I was playing with controllers.
You need a sim.
Yeah. I want to do a racing sim. Like I want to have a freaking hobby one of these days, and racing sims would be perfect. I would. Do you have like a full sim?
I don't have any. I haven't played like a Formula 1 video game since probably 1999.
No way. See, I'd be curious to see how you would do at a Formula 1 sim. Like, just like, I bet you just walk on and crush everybody. Because people take it very seriously.
Like I've played like an actual, like an F1 simulator.
Oh, okay.
Like one of the state-of-the-art ones where they're measuring your, you get data analytics. You can pretty much, it's just like a race car. It's got, like, it moves around on you and stuff. You have this huge screen in front of you. It's massive. It's like a movie screen. It goes all around you and stuff. You got to wear a helmet when you're in this thing because of all of the dynamics with the movable chassis and stuff. So I've done that, like, and that's very realistic, but never done the PC sim racing stuff ever, even though I've heard it's really good. So I would love to, but I can't afford it, man. It's so expensive.
Oh, it is. It is. Well, you can build a simulator for like less than $200. Like you can build your own and get the guy that won the Formula 1 online world championship won it with a steering wheel worth $300. Like the steering wheel and pedals. Yeah. Like I have one. It's a Logitech. not expensive. Like the ones that some people spend like $2 or $3 grand on like just the steering wheel, right? And you know, you could buy the simulators for $100,000 or whatever, the ones you're talking about.
Yeah.
But the guys that are like, you know, these are kids from the middle of nowhere. And they're winning because they had cheap equipment, but they got good at it. So I feel like I would love to see what you would look like in a sim, especially on like iRacing or one of the Formula One online forums, because I think, you know, give you an hour, figure out the timing and the shifting and all that. And I feel like you'd be walking people in races.
I'd love it, man. That'd be awesome. So
we gotta get that
got a
happening
free
for
sim.
You. Yeah.
Buddy, thanks very much for taking the time to do this. It's been great having you on. I always appreciate your time. For those of you listening to Nailing the Apex, Nailing the Apex, please head on over to Spotify, give us a 5-star rating and a follow. Same goes with Apple Podcasts as well. Write reviews. It really helps us grow the show. And you can also watch us on YouTube as well. Adam, thanks again, man, for taking the time. We'll talk to everybody later.
Tim, love you.